welcome to Grace's Place. Thanks for stopping by. In my last video, we made pie dough. So if you're not familiar with pie dough, make sure you go check that video out because we're going to be using that in this recipe today. So today we're making puff pastry. Puff pastry is a laminated dough. You might be familiar with other laminated doughs such as croissants and danishes. Puff pastry doesn't have any yeast in it, so it solely relies on the steam from the butter to rise. So when we're making puff pastry, the first thing you're going to need to do is make a butter block. This recipe has a pound of butter in it. That's 4 sticks. Delicious, I know. What we're gonna do is we're gonna unwrap our sticks of butter, and the butter needs to be what we call plastic stage of butter. You might remember feeling this from when you made your pie dough, but it's where it's still cold, but it's very malleable. That's what we're looking for, okay? All right, so we're gonna take all the sticks of butter and we're gonna put them inside some plastic wrap. So I just mush it up a little bit. And I get some flour. It's about a tablespoon. I'm just gonna mush it all together. My hands are gonna be nice and soft after this video. All right. So the heat from your hands is going to melt your butter a little bit, so you want to make sure you work pretty quickly. And once I have it all nice and flexible, I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap and form it into a block. That's why they call it a butter block. Alright, so I have a ball of butter, time to make it a block of butter. So I'm loosely covering it with the plastic wrap. If you have a marble rolling pin, go for it. I'm going to use, this is a French tapered rolling pin. That's my favorite rolling pin. I'm just going to go a little lighter than usual, but you can really get that aggression out with your rolling pin. I'm standing with one foot behind the other, so you really get that hit in there. And we're going to be using this technique throughout making puff dough. We're really learning how to laminate dough. That is going to be a great technique to have in your toolbox because you can use it for croissants and you can use it for danishes, you can use it for whatever. Oh. And then I just like to square it off on the table. And since it's in plastic wrap, we're not getting butter all over the place. It's nice. You know, this is great for getting any aggression out. Maybe you're in quarantine, people are getting on your nerves, can't go outside. It's a fun thing to do. So, I got my block together. I'm gonna put it back in the fridge. It's important through this whole process that your butter stays in this plastic stage. You might have to go back and forth in the fridge. You might have to wait a couple minutes with it out on the counter to warm up a little bit. You really just have to pay attention to your dough and see what it's telling you that it needs. The whole idea of lamination is to create these layers of butter, dough, butter, dough, butter, dough. So when you put it into the oven, a nice hot oven, the butter will go from solid to liquid to gas very quickly. So this way the fat will melt and give you that nice flavor, but the water will steam and lift up all those layers. So if the butter is too warm before it goes into the oven, it's gonna melt into the dough and then you're not gonna have that nice steam action to lift up your dough. So that's why it's really important to keep your dough chilled and in this plastic stage when you're working with it. On the other hand, if your butter is too cold and you're trying to work with it, the butter will push through the pie dough and create holes. So then when you're trying to steam it, there's no layer to push against to lift up the dough. It's going to take a little bit of practice, but you guys will get it down. It's all about this feeling of the plastic butter. So I have my pie dough from yesterday. I'm going to take my bench knife. Alright, we're going to encase the butter into the dough using a technique called the Clover Fold. I'm going to make an X on my dough with my bench knife. Okay? This is going to separate my dough into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant is going to be a leaf of my clover, with the middle slightly raised above the thickness of the clover leaf petals. This is because once I make my clover, I'm going to put my butter in the center, and then I'm gonna fold the leaves over. So the extra thickness on the bottom is going to not really be extra once you put the leaves over on top. All right, so So you don't need huge petals, just enough so you know they'll make it to the top of the butter block. So as I'm doing this, I realized that I have my recipe, because in order to have the nice table view, I have to do all my recipes twice. So I should have had the butter block and I didn't. So I'm going to take half my butter block and put it in. But for you guys at home, I'll have the recipe with the right measurements in the beginning. So you got your butter block, and you're going to fold 1 clover over. 1 clover leaf over. Notice how I'm brushing? I don't want any excess flour because it's going to prevent my dough from sticking. So in between every brush, you're going to go opposite sides and close it up. So once you have this little package of butter, you're going to pinch the seams together and you're going to beat it down with your rolling pin. Baking is therapy, guys. Now if you're doing this and you notice the butter is coming through, stop, because that means your butter's too cold. Your butter's or your dough is too warm. You have to make that decision for yourself. If your dough is too warm and your butter's already in it, I would put it in the refrigerator and let them both get to the same temperature, and then kind of re-thaw it a tiny bit. So you notice I'm not really rolling, I'm just beating it down. So your first fold, many people do what's called an envelope fold or the letter fold, which is the tri-fold you would use to make to send a letter in the mail. If any of you guys know what it's like to send a letter in the mail anymore. The other fold that's used is called the book fold. So if you guys ever had a textbook, the dust cover on the book, it's folded and then it's folded around the front and the back end of the book. So that's the book fold. So you're going to fold it in and then fold it on itself. I personally think you get more layers out of a fold when you use the book fold. So I don't really see the point in using the envelope fold because I want maximum layers. So once I got, what is that, 1/4 of an inch thick, right? I'm gonna fold it into my first book fold. All right. So from the side, you can see how it's folded. Just gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna put 1 with my finger. That's gonna help me keep track of how many folds I put in. 20 minutes is the least amount of time I would personally wait in between puff pastry folds, because that's kind of the minimum amount of time you want to give your gluten to rest. And if you try to, you could do like a quick puff pastry where you do all these folds at once, but you'll notice the dough starts to shrink back, and that just means the gluten is getting too hard. So I give it like 20 minutes and I do 3 folds just like this. So you'll see as we go, the dough is going to start to look a lot smoother and a lot more yellow because of all that butter. For your second fold, you're going to do another book fold, but it's important to know where your seams are. Your seams are going to be on your ends. These seams are going to get folded in. Okay, so I'm going to make it a little bit wider, but I want it longer here so I can fold in my seams. So I'm starting to see some of the butter push through a little bit. So I want to be a little bit careful. All right. It's not so bad that I think it's going to push through. But I could be wrong. Something I also want to note, I'm just going to let that, actually that's pretty good, is you want to pay attention to the back too, because while you might not see it pushing through the front, it might be pushing through the back. I have these pads of butter that were actually in my pie dough. Don't worry about those too much. I'm going to fold them in. Alright, that's going to be fold number 2. Notice how I fold the seam sides in. The next time I bring it out to roll it out and then have these seam sides folded in. Okay guys, time for fold number 3. And this is fold number 3. You could go up to 6 folds with your puff dough, 6 to 8 actually, but that just takes longer. I think I might do 1 more fold in this, but then I'm going to use it to make some turkey pot pie. So if you want to continue doing folds, go for it. It's the same thing over and over again. Make sure you're folding the seam sides in. You can do that 6 to 8 times before you roll it out for your final product of whatever you're using. But you want to make sure you have at least 3 book folds in. So you might have seen one of my other videos, how to roast the turkey. I have a lot of leftover turkey from that video. So I'm making a turkey pot pie. In this bowl I have leftover turkey. It's mostly all the dark meat. I like to use dark meat in pot pies because it doesn't dry out as much. So I also have in here some carrots and celery, but then I also have a bag of frozen veggies. I love to use frozen veggies in pot pies like this because it's really simple and quick. I can just take it from the freezer. I don't have to cut anything. I don't have to wash anything. Super easy. And this turkey gravy I actually made out of the turkey stock. So I'm just gonna mix all this up. I'm actually gonna do this restaurant style where I just put the layer on top. I would have done both top and the bottom, but while I was doing my turns, I was actually on the phone with my mom and I told her what I was making and she was like, that sounds good. I want some. So now I gotta make 2, so I don't really have enough for a top and a bottom. So I'm just gonna do the nice top, and that should have enough like starch where it will balance out with the filling. If you do that and you feel like it's not gonna balance out, you could also add a starch into the filling, like cut up potatoes maybe, and that will kind of help balance that out. You do 3 turns in your puff dough. I wound up doing 3, 2. I'm just gonna flour it and now I'm gonna roll it out. I want to get to the kind of like 1/4 inch before I actually start rolling. So when you're rolling this out, you want to make sure your puff pastry is a little bit bigger than the top of the pan you're gonna roll this out on. Just like in the pie dough video, I showed you guys how to put a bottom on a pie. It's even easier to put a top on a pie. You can just roll it on top. So I rolled out my puff pastry, and it's I guess that's about 1/8 of an inch thick, not too thin because you know, you want that nice poof. I'm going to take my pastry brush and I'm going to just brush it off. I want to see how to put the puff dough in the pie tin. You could just go to the last video on how to make pie dough, and it's the same exact technique. So I'm just doing the top. I'm going to take my pie dish. And fill it up. Make sure you fill this up all the way to the top. Okay. So I got some of my filling in there. Make a smaller one. Put the stuff I have left. I brushed off my dough on one side. I'm going to put that on to my dough, onto my pie dish. I'm just going to make sure I get all the edges. I'm going to make sure I brush off excess always. Alright, I'm going to press down a little bit on the edges to stick it to the pie tin. And then I'm going to take my bench knife, just like a pie shell. We would do with the pie dough, and go all the way around. Now I'm going to save my scraps. Usually you would say you can't re-roll pie dough. I mean, or a puff dough rather. But you can. But how you re-roll it matters. So you know how we put the folds in? If we just balled it all up, then it would be like, the folds wouldn't be layered. They would just be like smushed together. But if you just refold everything together and let it rest, there's no reason why you can't reuse that. So that's what I do. Just make sure you don't get any turkey in it or something. But I'll make some pommes out of this. So before you put your puff dough in the oven, make sure you dock your dough. I forgot. But also make sure you cut a steam vent into the top, so when the filling starts to cook, the steam won't make the top all wobbly. Alright. I'm just going to cut next, but you could use a circle cutter or, I don't know, a hard cutter. You can get fancy, whatever you want to do. Next I'm just going to egg wash the top. Give it a nice coating. And my dough is still pretty cold, so I can pop it into the oven. If your dough warmed up while you did this, make sure you chill it before putting it into the oven. Putting your pies on a pan like this and then putting it into the oven makes it really easy to get it in the oven, and any drippings that come up won't smoke up your apartment.